I'm JJ Walsh, your host in Hiroshima, Japan, and today I have the pleasure of talking with Jessica Cork, all the way in Georgia. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Jessica, you have an interesting backstory. You spent some time in Japan, you studied Japanese before you came over. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we start?
Sure. So I've actually been interested in Japan since I was about 10 years old. My grandfather worked for IBM and he used to make quite a few trips to Japan in the early 80s, kind of the height of the bubble economy. And he used to bring me back all kinds of beautiful gifts, dolls and origami. And I was just fascinated by that. So I decided at 10 years old, I am going to go to Japan. So when I was 15, I did an 8-week homestay actually in Mihara in Hiroshima, Mihara City. And that was a really interesting experience for me. I had really never been away from home. This was pre-internet days. So basically, I got on a plane and said goodbye to my parents and had no conversation with them for the next 8 weeks. And my host family did not really speak English very much. My host dad did. He was not home. So I spent most of my time with my host mom and my host siblings, and I spoke zero Japanese. And we struggled to communicate, but they were absolutely wonderful. I loved Mihara. I loved Hiroshima, absolutely fell in love with Japan and decided I was going to come back. But the next time I come back, I want to be able to speak the language. So I went back home, graduated high school, and then went to University of Massachusetts to major in Japanese. And then I did a summer study abroad and then also a 1-year study abroad at ICU in Tokyo. And those were the 8-hour-a-day super intensive Japanese language classes where you're studying 100 kanji a day and feel like you're never going to master it. Quite difficult experience actually, but really, really good for getting language proficiency up. And then after graduation, I decided to go back to Japan as a JET program participant. And I applied for the coordinator for international relations, the CIR position. And without requesting it, I was open to going anywhere in the country. I just knew I wanted to go to a rural area. That was the only thing I said is send me to a rural area. I had already experienced life in Tokyo and I really wanted to see kind of the other side of Japan. And they sent me to Hiroshima Prefecture again. And I was sent to a very small town, 4,000 people in Yamagata-gun. It's now called Aki-Ota-cho. At the time, it was called Kake-cho. So it was one of those towns that was kind of consolidated, like so many rural areas. And I just had the most amazing 3 years there, as I think, many JET program participants do. Just people were so welcoming, and I got to do so many amazing things, planting rice paddies and learning tea ceremony, and made something like 50 speeches on every single topic under the sun to every single group in town, and just had a really great experience. And then came back to the United States after that because I really honestly wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do next. So I had this Japanese language ability, but I didn't know how to use it. And the only thing that came to mind was becoming an interpreter. So I moved back to New Hampshire briefly, but there obviously are not so many Japanese interpreting jobs in a rural state like New Hampshire. I was willing to go anywhere in the country. And the first place that called me back was a manufacturing company in Georgia. So that's how I ended up in Georgia. So I worked for a year as an interpreter and found out within about 6 months that I really hate interpreting. So that was the other interesting part, I think, in my Japan journey.
That's a good life lesson, though.
It is like you sometimes don't know what you like to do until you try doing it. But then soon after that, I actually got what at the time was really my dream job. I worked for the Japanese consulate in Atlanta for 11 years. And I was in charge of educational and cultural affairs there. And among other things, I was the JET program coordinator. So I actually got to sit on the other side of the table and hire future JET program participants. I one time calculated that I have interviewed over 1,000 JET program participants in the time.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
You've had quite a background. There's a lot we could talk about there. And then you ended up, so you're in Georgia now?
That's correct. Yep. I'm in Atlanta.
And
Yeah.
Georgia has such a long connection with Japan, which I didn't realize. So the project that we're talking about today is about the Peace Bell for the Carter Center connection back to Japan. But tell us a little bit about the history of companies that have had relationships with Japan over the years. It's so interesting.
Sure. So I actually now am working for YKK. If you do not know YKK, we make half the zippers in the world. We make over 10 billion zippers a year. So if you have never heard of us, just check out your jeans. I guarantee that you'll see the little YKK symbol there. And YKK is headquartered in Tokyo and happens to be the first Japanese company to set up operations in Georgia. And the reason behind that is an interesting story. At the time, we were actually looking to open a factory somewhere in the Southeast. We were looking at all different states, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina. At the time, President Carter was governor of Georgia. So Jimmy Carter was governor, and it was his idea to start encouraging Japanese companies to invest in Georgia. He really strongly felt that that was the future for growing the economy. And YKK was the first company that he recruited. And the reason that he was successful in recruiting YKK was because he met with the founder of YKK, Tadao Yoshida. And Tadao Yoshida has this really great philosophy that continues to be our philosophy today called the cycle of goodness. And it says, no one prospers without rendering benefit to others. And Tadao Yoshida, has had this conversation on his first meeting with Governor Carter, telling him about his philosophy and how he really strongly believed that the purpose of a company is not to make a profit, but is to, continuously invest in its employees, in the community, in its customers, in this kind of like ongoing, cycle that all three of those stakeholders, now we hear this word stakeholder capitalism, and it's all very common, but, he was talking about this back from the 1930s, he was talking about this, but told this to Jimmy Carter, and Jimmy Carter, that really just, really aligned very well with the way that that now, President Carter thinks about the same thing. So they, long story short, became very close friends. They remained close friends for his entire life, for Tadao Yoshida's entire life, and now his son, Tadahiro Yoshida, who became the next chairman of YKK, remained close. So anyway, that was kind of the start of that Japanese investment in Georgia. And now we're really proud. I mean, as YKK, we hope we had a small role to play in that as well. But there are now over 600 Japanese companies in Georgia. Japan is the number one foreign direct investor in Georgia, and employs over 35,000 Georgians, of which I am one. So lots of
That's
companies
amazing.
making lots of things here in Georgia.
Yeah,
So,
and to research for this talk, I found that in Miyoshi there is a Carter Center, as well as the Carter Center in Georgia. So there's that connection as well. So I want to go visit now that I know about it.
absolutely. So I can get into a little bit about why that Carter Center is there if you'd like to hear that story.
Yeah, go
So,
ahead.
yeah. So, so as I said, there's this strong relationship between the Japanese community and President Carter. So kind of starting with YKK, but then really broadening out to the entire Japanese community, especially the early investors here in Georgia. They really credit, President Carter with the reason that all these Japanese companies came. And so I, also as part of my role with YKK, I had always been aware that there was this bell that President Carter had in his possession. It's as soon as you walk into the Carter Center, there's this big Japanese bell sitting there. And I'd walked by it a bunch of times. You can see like some imagery here of this bell, but had not really thought, too much about it. But as I started to get more involved with the Carter Center, I ended up hearing this incredible backstory. And what happened was when the Carter Center opened in 1986, the Japanese community was so grateful to everything that President Carter had done to foster really good relations between Japan and Georgia, not just with the investment here, but as president, he visited Japan multiple times. He has been to Hiroshima, I think maybe you're aware, visited not as president, but after his presidency, and has just really been instrumental in kind of keeping these good relationships going. So the Japanese community in Georgia in 1986 gifted President Carter this bell to commemorate the opening of the Carter Center. So you see that the bell right there. Well, it turns out that after the bell was gifted, the whole story about the bell came out. So they were not aware of it at the time, and I don't know how many people are aware in the audience, but actually during the 1940s, there was, a proclamation sent out all over Japan where almost all of the temples in Japan had to give up their temple bell in order to support the war effort, with the idea that they were to be melted down and turned into ammunition. And in fact, I recently found out as many as 95% of temple bells were lost. And as I've been working on this project, I've been finding other stories of bells popping up like all over the place, but a lot in the United States and sometimes in places like the UK. And that actually turns out to be the case with our bell as well. So the Japanese Chamber of Commerce purchased the bell in Florida, and it was simply on the open market art dealer. And I'm sure the people purchased at the time, you're not really aware of like all the history, because when something's for sale, you just, you purchase it and it's a nice gift. Well, it turns out that there was a member of the Japanese parliament who is friends with President Carter, came to visit the Carter Center soon after the bell was gifted to President Carter. And the bell is actually, there's carvings all over it. And the bell was cast in 1820. So it's actually really hard to see the carvings. Like unless you're looking very, very carefully, it would be very easy to miss. But if you look very carefully, the name of Shoganji Temple in Hiroshima, like the kind of the whole address and everything is written on the side of the bell. Again, you have to be looking at it under the right light and looking very carefully. So this Japanese member of parliament saw that and said, President Carter, I think that you have this bell is actually from this temple in Japan. So he goes back, the member of parliament goes back to Konu, so it's now Miyoshi, part of Miyoshi, Hiroshima, goes back to the town, and along with the Consul General of Japan, and tells them, guess what? We have your bell that you lost in the 1840s. And the town, now President Carter's intention was to return it. He's like, this is a spoil of war. I can't keep this. It rightfully belongs back in the town. But when they went and they offered to return it, the town had some discussion and different opinions. But what was decided was, they were really so overwhelmed that actually President Carter was displaying this bell very prominently inside of the Carter Center as a symbol of peace between Japan and the United States. It was presented to him as a symbol of that good relationship. And so the town eventually said, please, President Carter, we want for you to keep the bell, and we want for you to display it as the Heiwa no Kane, the peace bell. We only have 2 requests. We want for you to write a handwritten message to our town, because we are going to cast a replica bell, and we're going to call it the Friendship Bell, and we're going to hang it inside of our temple. And then the second request is, please, President Carter, when we unveil the Friendship Bell, please come to our town. And this is the part of the story that really gets me every time, is he went. So this town, this is a former president, extremely busy person. I'm sure you're aware he's a great humanitarian, flying all over the world, doing all kinds of amazing things. And he goes to this town of approximately 2,000 people. And he's there at the unveiling of the Friendship Bell. And the town, there's some wonderful video that you can see on the town's website, where you can see, the town, just everybody in the town came out and met with him. He had a town hall, open discussions with kids, talked about all different kinds of topics, really engaged with the community. So the town of Konu was quite overwhelmed by all of this. And so they decided to build a Carter Center. So their civic center is called the Carter Center. And they invited President Carter to come back for the opening. And he did. He went back again. So he actually went to this town twice. And then as a result, he also, they started a sister city relationship between Miyoshi and the town of Americus, which is, President Carter is from a tiny, tiny village called Plains. So Americus is the next closest city. So they have a sister city relationship that's been going on since 1991, students going back and forth all of the time. And anyway, there's this like long standing, ongoing relationship. So that's kind of the whole story of like where, you know, that Carter Center Miyoshi comes from. And that kind of brings us up to today with the current project that we're working on.
That's amazing. Like, what a great story of mutual developing mutual understanding, respect for each other's cultures, making peace relationships through something that they thought was destroyed. They were happy it wasn't destroyed. And then having that sister city established over a peace bell. It's so special. I love that story.
Yeah,
Uh,
especially the thing that gets me, you know, it's supposed to have been ammunition, you know, for us to fight each other. And here, this bell that luckily was saved. We don't even know how it was saved. We know it went to England somehow. We don't know how it got to England and then ended up in Florida and then ended up in possession of a president. It's just kind of amazing. But I love the person-to-person exchange that's resulted. So it's not just a bell sitting there on display. It is the reason that there are hundreds of students who have gone back and forth between Konu and Americus now, you know, over the past 25 years since the sister city was established.
how wonderful. Yeah, Kyle has said, wow, what a great message for young people in both countries. I think that's true. And then like you have had so many wonderful experiences from your high school days in Japan and Japanese students in America and building that educational foundation of mutual understanding from a young age. I think that's really important, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think if we can get, especially the kids, that's definitely who, you know, at that young age where they're really impressionable, and that those trips that they make, you know, even for sister city relationships might be like 1 week, but they're absolutely life changing for a lot of these kids. You know, I've had an opportunity also through my work to work with several other sister city relationships, and I've taken students to Japan who have never been on an airplane before. I've had students who have never left Georgia before, and they come back from that experience just absolutely changed in their horizons, just so much, you know, more wide and open to new experiences.
Fantastic. Let's talk a little bit about the timeline and the building of the bell tower, because I think people might not realize that you're really following the Japanese temple carpentry traditions. You're bringing carpenters over from Miyoshi. It's an amazing process, which unfortunately is kind of dying out in Japan. There's not as many people who know how to carry on the traditions and the culture, the way the head architects think about preservation of wood, planting wood generations ahead, and having the plans of the buildings they're creating past generations past their own lifetime. This always gets me when we talk about traditional methods, and that is part of this temple tower that you're creating, right?
Absolutely. So yeah. So what happened with this project was, you know, as I said, I'd always kind of known that this bell was sitting there. I knew a bit about the story of the bell, but the problem is the way that it's displayed inside of the Carter Center. It's sitting on this just really low pedestal on the floor. So most Americans, right, exactly like that. Most Americans walk by that. They have no idea this is a bell. First of all, like they, you know, it's not hanging. You can't hear it. And it's also it's in a nice location, but it's right inside the entrance. So most people walk right past it. And I've talked to so many people who've been at the Carter Center hundreds of times, and they're like, "There's a bell? Like I never saw it." So anyway, we about in early 2020, actually, the Japanese consulate convened in Atlanta, convenes a meeting between the Japan America Society of Georgia, which I'm actually the chair, the Japanese Chamber of Commerce of Georgia, and the Japan External Trade Organization. So we're lucky in Georgia to have all of these kind of four key Japan-related organizations. They brought us together and they said that they wanted to build some kind of symbol of friendship between Japan and the United States. And, we got everyone together and we were sitting there like garden, bridge. And then in the middle of that meeting, I just had that aha moment of like remembering that I had this dream of building a proper tower for this bell, actually probably 5 or 6 years ago, but I'd sort of started to try to get some traction on it, but just for a variety of reasons, I just couldn't get any like traction. But because there was this whole group of us coming together with the consulate saying we want to do something, I guess it's all about the right time, kind of the right time and the right place and the right group of people. And everyone just really loved that idea and kind of like we latched onto it. But originally we were thinking, a tower, like, and like just some tower, like Japanese, of course, but we're just going to build a tower. And if you look at different bells around the United States, some are kind of Japanese, but some are a little bit more simple and not quite so ornate. But I, at some point in the process of us having these conversations, we said, what we really should do is go back to Konu, and what if we were to build a replica tower? So they have a replica bell. We have the real bell, right? So why don't we just we'll build a replica tower and it'll be just this perfect exchange. And so we got in touch with the people in Konu, and they actually were very excited about this and told us they had actually tried approaching the Carter Center probably about 10 years ago to try to make this happen. And again, it was the same thing. It just, for whatever reason, the great group of people weren't there. So we ended up just anyway getting a lot of momentum behind it. And then the people in town of Miyoshi, the city government has been just hugely supportive, and they reached out to Kondo Kensetsu, which is what you're looking at right now, and they were the ones who came up with the drawings. We got all the CAD drawings, the exact blueprint, and what you can see right there is they're kind of like taken over the whole project on the Japan side. So they went, and what was very surprising to me, like I had no idea. Honestly, this whole project is so much more complex than I ever dreamed. I won't say that I wouldn't have done it knowing now what I knew then, but honestly, I thought this was going to be a relatively not that costly, pretty easy project. And actually it's taken us nearly 2 years and quite a lot of fundraising to make this happen. But they went and they cut down a 150-year-old cypress tree in the town of Sera, that's near Miyoshi. And it was just this magnificent tree that they went and then they dried it. It takes like 4 months. There's a particular process that I had no idea. It takes this whole process to go through and drying it. And then it took about 4 months for them to hand carve, so that when you're seeing them hand carving everything, it's by traditional methods. So it's going to be put together, no nails. This like absolutely blows the mind of everyone here in the United States. I've been talking to the contractors on the American side. That this all will go together with no nails. And they, you may have seen, but they constructed the entire thing in Japan. They're also, one thing I'm very excited about is they were also bringing over the traditional roof tiles, and the ones that are from Hiroshima. Like I know different parts of Japan have different roof tiles, and I, for one, love the roof tiles in Hiroshima in particular. The shachihoko at the top, and I just love those, and those are all going to be brought over, shipped over from Hiroshima. We're also having 4 of the carpenters come over, and they are going to oversee the construction over here in Atlanta. So the dry, so all of the construction was completed in April. The materials are all on a ship right now. They're supposed to arrive June 25th, so it's actually really soon. In Los Angeles. They're coming through Los Angeles, and they'll be shipped here to Atlanta. And we're having a groundbreaking ceremony on July 8th. This is a Soto Zen temple. So we are having the Soto Zenshu headquarters in North America in Los Angeles is going to be sending some priests over to do a traditional, Buddhist groundbreaking ceremony for us. And then the construction will begin, and all the construction will be completed at the end of August. And we have set our opening ceremony and ribbon cutting for September 30th, because October 1st is President Carter's 98th birthday. So this
That's
will be kind of a
amazing.
birthday present for him. Yes.
That's amazing. And I'm
Yeah.
showing this short video, which is on the Carter Center Japan page, showing these amazing craftspeople using their hand tools to so carefully and beautifully carve all the wooden pieces which are going into the bell tower. Amazing. So everything's going to be made in Japan and shipped over with the carpenters who are going to assemble it in Georgia, right?
That's correct, right? And we have a crew, an American crew here that will be, helping them to get everything put together. It'll take about 10 days to reconstruct the tower here, and then an additional 10 days to put the roof tiles on, because there's a whole process for doing that as well, for getting the tiles on. And then, of course, when they're here in Georgia, I'm really hoping to be able to have some workshops as well, cultural workshops where they can share some of their artistry with the people here as well, because I'm sure there's quite a few woodworkers here in the United States who would be very interested in this technique. As you said, it's not so many opportunities to see this. Japanese hand tools, I understand, are very revered by people who are into wood carving. And in fact, some of you may not know this, President Carter builds furniture in his spare time. He's actually, if you go to the Carter Center, there's quite a few pieces of his own furniture there. And when he has visited Japan, one of the places he loves to go are the places that sell the Japanese hand tools. So that's just another small bit of the story that I think is so appropriate, that I think he'll appreciate a lot.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I know that President Carter often builds houses for people. He's part of Habitat for Humanity and a lot of other very social impact oriented organizations. So it's
Exactly.
wonderful, wonderful connection to his legacy and his passion to help people.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So I think that's what really brings this whole project, full circle, is that we can highlight, many people are very aware of everything that he's done, both in the United States and around the world, but are not quite, as familiar with this additional Japan connection as well. So it's just going to kind of highlight that. The other thing that I was thinking, we were talking a little bit before about the importance of people to people exchanges. And one thing that I really also love about a bell tower is that a bell tower is something that can be active. So, you ring a bell. And so right now, the way that the bell is being displayed is we can't ring it. We can't touch it. It's like kind of like a off limits, work of art. This is going to enable it where we can bring in student groups. I'm thinking we can do maybe Joya no Kane on, New Year's Eve. Like we can bring the Japanese community in to do like special occasions. There is the International Day of Peace every year in September. And I'm thinking there's lots of ways that this can be an active way to celebrate, good relationships between people around the world as well.
Absolutely. And I am in love with all these traditional bells. I would love to hear the story of where the replica is made, if you have any of that information.
Yeah, I don't know how the replica came about. So that is, if you go to Konu, you can see it, it's there. I don't know. It was in 1991, I believe, that they had the replica made. So that was when they invited President Carter there for the unveiling. But I don't know exactly what the process was or how they did that.
Yeah, because I know that this is another craft in Japan that's kind of a dying out knowledge and how to make these amazing bells. In Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park, we have a beautiful bell, the Bell of Peace, which has a flattened map of the world without borders. And the idea is that when it rings, people around the world should hear it and feel that they can be more active in seeking out peace in their lives. Can you describe the design of the bell in the Carter Center?
Sure. Yeah. So we were asking, actually, the last time we had a visitor from the Atlanta Soto, or I'm sorry, from the Soto Zen Center in Los Angeles come out, and so we were kind of asking him a lot. What like what all is on here and which way should we face it? And one thing that he was telling me was that the little there's kind of these little bubble type parts on the top of it, but that is almost like that's the Buddha's head, like where you have like the Buddha statues that have, his hair. Like that. So that's what that is supposed to symbolize. And then it's covered in carvings. As I said, it's like you can see like carvings all over the outside. And the carving, actually, there was a lot of different things on it, in addition to the address of the temple itself. It had the names of all of the donors on it, which I thought was really interesting. Even back in like 1820, you have to recognize your sponsors. So I thought that was interesting. It had the name of the year that it was constructed and where it was cast and the name of the company that cast it, and actually quite a lot of detailed information carved into the outside. It's actually really large too. I'm not sure if you can quite tell there. You can tell a little bit better in the picture that had people standing next to it, but this is nearly like 4 feet. I'd say over 4 feet tall. It's much larger. You can see there with standing there with President Carter, you can see how tall it is. I mean, it's really big, like something like 250 pounds.
And it must be, really heavy.
Really heavy. So this is what perplexes me the most about how all of these bells ended up all over the world is I am assuming, so this was in Kure. We know it was in Kure at the Naval Yard. That's where it was sent. And I'm going to guess that it was a British, someone in the British Navy picked it up from there because it ended up in England. But I just wonder, this bell is so large. Like, how did it end up from, all the way from Hiroshima over to England, and then it got moved to Florida, and then the person who had it in Florida was from the UK. So, and that person was getting ready to move back to the UK and just put it for sale. That's why it was for sale. But how does this like 250 pound like huge thing just get moved all over the world like that? It's pretty incredible journey, I think.
That is amazing. I'm astounded that it, and then the fact, like you mentioned at the beginning, the fact that it wasn't melted down into bullets for the military, which was happening to all the bells around Japan at that time, that it was given to the Navy as directed, but luckily the war ended before it was destroyed. So that's amazing.
Right. And, and as I said a little bit earlier, when I started to do some research, I mean, actually I have a Google alert for Heiwa no Kane now. And so I actually am finding there's these peace bells all over the world, actually, that I'm finding out through this Google alert. And again, I found this article talking about 95% being lost. So it made me realize that, I always thought we had a treasure anyway, just because of the story. But now I have a stronger feeling about that than I did before. The fact that, they're relatively rare, and we're still seeing stories coming up. I mean, even now, of people finding them. They're like in people's personal collections, or, in some cases they were gifted to the city. I understand like Boston has one that they was found, and then they said, please keep it, like the similar story. Where they've gone back to figure out how to try to give it back, and then in Japan has said, please keep it as a symbol of peace. So it's nice to see those stories, and different towns are dealing with it in different ways. So they're being displayed differently, kind of depending on the situation. But I have a feeling we have something pretty unique. I think we may have the only replica bell tower. We'll see. UN also has a beautiful peace bell. I don't know if you're familiar with that story. There was a whole movement behind it. It was made out of coins collected from all over the world. There was a Japanese woman who was behind that movement to collect these coins and then to melt it together to cast a peace bell that's outside of the UN.
Wow, that's amazing. We have a great comment from Kyle. He says, holy cow, I am amazed, and we'll get to that bell when in Atlanta the next time I'm there. So I think there is that element too, right? Like it's a great part of tourism or visitor appeal for Miyoshi, this small rural town in Hiroshima. It's also a point of appeal for people visiting Georgia, I would imagine.
Absolutely. And again, I would love people to go out to Miyoshi to go see that bell too. If you're over in Hiroshima, please go check it out. I have not had the opportunity to go. And now what I feel sad about, I lived in Hiroshima for 3 years and I didn't know this story. So I really am dying to get back there. But for sure, we're hoping that, the Carter Center is actually a really great place to visit anyway. There's a really good museum there, but now we just have something extra, for people to come and see when they visit the Carter Center, for sure. The other thing that is an interesting piece of this is Atlanta is currently building, in the process of building what we call the Beltline, which is a walking trail that encircles pretty much the entire city. They're constructing, parts of it are already finished, and then other parts are going around. But the Carter Center happens to run right along the Beltline. So what I'm really hoping will happen is that there'll be opportunities where they're ringing the bell for some reason, and people will be enticed to want to come, off of that walking trail, that biking trail, and kind of maybe they didn't have a reason to come to the Carter Center before, and now they're going to come over, because they can hear it. Also, the Carter Center has this wonderful market, like a farmer's market every weekends. And the place where the bell is like practically in the middle of where the farmer's market is. So again, we have another opportunity to kind of engage. And I'm sure people that are at the farmer's market don't know the story. And so once this is under construction, are going to come over and check it out and learn the story.
Well, that's wonderful. Do you want to talk a little bit about how people can get involved and help to raise funds and support this project?
Absolutely. I'd be happy to talk about that. Yes, we're in the kind of final push of our fundraising. We're like almost there. We're about at 80% right now, but we are still seeking donations, any amount. If you donate over $100, you will get your name on the, we're going to be building a monument that is going to tell the story, and then with all of the donors' names. But if you're, you can donate either through the Japan America Society of Georgia. So that's the page that you are looking at right now. And the website for that is JASGeorgia, all spelled out.org. And that is a nonprofit organization. So it's, we can send a donation letter. Or if you are in Japan and you prefer to do your donation through the city of Miyoshi, they are also collecting money as well that will be there to support the project. And that website, which is where you're seeing a lot of these great videos that have been shown, that's worth going there just to look at the videos. But that is peacebellproject.jp. And that website is available both in Japanese and in English. It initially comes up in Japanese, but if you look in the upper right-hand corner, there's a little button where you can switch everything to English. So yeah, they'll collect money through there, and both of those.
We'll share both of those links right now in the comment section. Yeah, wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah.
And one thing we haven't looked at yet from the Japanese site is the pictures of the wooden temple, not temple, the bell tower under construction is gorgeous. You can see all the detailed work of all the wood here. Absolutely beautiful. This is a smaller model, I imagine.
Right. Yeah. So that I was blown away when they sent us these pictures. The carpenters first created a quarter scale. This is quarter scale model. And they put this in City Hall in order to let the citizens know that this project was going on and to help with the fundraising effort as well. And then you can see the roof right there, and the tiles would go on top of that, of course. So you have the black, traditional Japanese style tiles. The other thing that is interesting to me is the wood there. You can see it's like untreated. So it's meant to have that beautiful, this is cedar, but it'll age, over time and turn that beautiful kind of aged look, so that when it's first constructed, it'll look like this, and then over time. And back to what you were saying about the importance of choosing the wood, and that they chose this tree that was 150 years old. So this temple, this bell is over 200 years old, and that's definitely, we're hoping this bell tower is going to be there, in place for 200 years or more. Is kind of the, really trying to build something that is going to last and is going to look beautiful for a long period of time. So.
I admire that so much about the traditional temple carpenters, and how when they choose the trees for the carpentry, for the temples, they always pray and do a dedication and promise the trees that they will take care of them, and try to plant trees which will replace them in 400 years time or whatever down the road. And I just find that that a beautiful connection to nature, which we need more of. We often don't hear stories like that by craftspeople or anyone, businesses, right?
Exactly. Yeah, really built to last a long period of time, and beautiful workmanship that goes into this. So we're
Yeah.
excited. I'm also hoping that there'll be opportunity, for people in the Atlantic community to actually watch this being assembled too. I'm sure that's going to be quite interesting to see something again that, I mentioned before, without constructed with nails or really anything, just all the joinery going together so perfectly. It's something that will be, quite unique for most Americans to be able to watch. And
That's amazing. I've talked to a few people who are renovating old houses. I went to a Minka summit, people trying to preserve these old beautiful structures. And one of the things that one of the Kaminka Association America Japan is doing with Andrea Carlson, who talked on the show, is dismantling some of the beautiful old houses that are no longer wanted and shipping them to America where they're reassembled. So it's wonderful
really.
to see this interest even outside Japan of preserving this traditional technique, and there is a lot of interest in the carpentry and the traditional tools and everything. So wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen quite a few shows recently and interviews with a lot of foreigners in Japan that are trying to go into some of these more rural areas and are really love these old homes, but kind of bringing them up to make them a little bit more comfortable and easy to live in. But that is really interesting what you said about shipping it to the United States. I had not heard that. I'll have to find out how that's being done, because I love those old houses in Japan. The wood in it is just so beautiful. And
Yeah.
if it's properly cared for, a lot of those homes 100 years older or more can be lived in for a long time. That's one thing I do find unfortunate about some of the homes in Japan, is that the newer homes are not always built to last. I had heard at one point like 30 years was, I believe it's around 30 years is the average in Japan. And, as I mentioned before, I grew up in rural New England, and the house next to me was built in like 1740. So, and there's someone still living there, and it's been beautifully preserved, and it's a perfectly nice house, so there's kind of that mentality of just, preservation of the old homes, and don't quite see that as much in Japan, but I'm glad that there's more interest in that these days.
Yeah, definitely. And at the Minka Summit, we had wonderful talks by carpenters like John Stolenmeyer in Okayama. They do a firm called Somokosha, and they're actually building new Minka as well. They're building new
Mm.
traditional houses with new wood, as well as remodeling old houses. So it's wonderful to see that enthusiasm. I hope
Mm-hmm.
it continues and brings back a lot of this knowledge, which is dying out without that interest, right?
Right, right.
Now, one thing we haven't talked about, which I wanted to mention, I found so interesting, was Georgia coffee in Japan.
Yeah, so so that's Coca-Cola. Yeah, so Atlanta is home to Coca-Cola. So that is why there is Georgia coffee. Now, ironically, we cannot buy Georgia coffee in Georgia. So every time I go to Japan,
Really?
that's one of the first things I need to go get. Although, however, the Coca-Cola headquarters, if you go inside the headquarters office building, they do have it kind of like on tap.
That
But
is
isn't that
so
interesting? This is
interesting.
just for the Japanese market. So
Yeah.
Coca-Cola is really quite famous for making things specific to the, certain country markets, and Georgia coffee is one
Yeah,
of
I was
them.
reading that
Yeah.
it was launched in Japan in 1975, and it has become the most popular coffee brand for the canned coffee for Coca-Cola Japan. But I didn't realize that's why it's called Georgia, because the headquarters of Coca-Cola was from Georgia. And it
Exactly.
says from 2009, it is available in America as well, but only through Asian shopping markets, like you have
Okay.
Japantown or something, maybe.
Right, right. That makes sense. Yeah. Well, the American market hasn't, I think it's changing now a little bit with Starbucks, but originally canned coffee was something that was just not not something that Americans drank. I remember going to Japan for the first time in like 1990s and early 1990s, and just being sort of like just amazed that there's coffee in cans. So it's taken a while, so it hasn't been that popular, but maybe, now that there is canned coffee around, maybe they'll find a market here as well.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't realize. So there's been that long history between businesses, but also between people and exchange of the Japan American Society of Georgia. And like you said, 35,000 employees of 600 companies, was it
Yes,
in
that's
Georgia now?
correct. Yeah, that's correct. And a couple interesting stories among those, Georgia was the first US state to open an office in Tokyo. So now many states have their, economic development office there, but our office opened, I believe, in 1974. So again, it was quite early. And our consulate has been open since 1974 as well here. So there's, as far as U.S. now, of course, there's some other states that have had longer engagement, but as far as economic development, it's something that Georgia has put a really has invested a lot of time and energy into that good relationship with Japan. We also have an interesting economic conference that's called SUS Japan. It's called the Southeast U.S. Japan Conference, which takes place we alternate between Japan and I believe 7 southern states. And we gather, so every other year it's either in Japan or somewhere in the Southeast. And with a big gathering of government officials, economic development officials, people that work for Japanese companies and other Japan related organizations, gather a couple, 100 people come together to talk about the various business topics and economic development topics. So yeah, the business relationship, Georgia is interesting because we do not have very many Japanese Americans. There's only about, it's only about 8,000 or so Japanese citizens here, or people of Japanese descent. Depending on the census, I've seen between 8,000 and 14,000. But anyway, it's very different from a place, for example, like California or New York that, may have a large population. So most of the people that are here that are interested in the relationship with Japan, it's really a business interest. So sometimes the first opportunity for people to understand about Japanese culture comes because they're working for a Japanese company. And most of these are big manufacturing companies. So we have, employed like several thousand people. And then those Japanese companies have done a good job at kind of helping with, being really good corporate citizens. I think, for the most part, many of them are very involved in their local communities and making donations to, for example, the local community colleges and local, educational institutions. And then also trying to introduce Japanese culture. One example of that, we have in Georgia, the largest Japanese festival in the Southeast called Japan Fest. We get about 25,000 people every year. And what is interesting about Japan Fest, I think, that in comparison to other cultural festivals that I've been celebrating other cultures, is I would say probably 75% of the people that attend Japan Fest are Americans or non-Japanese. So because we have such a small Japanese community here, it's not like we're all, it's the whole Japanese, the entire Japanese community might be there, but it's like 8,000 people. So it's been a really wonderful outreach event to bring together a lot of the Japanese companies. We have a Japanese Chamber of Commerce, so they put together a really authentic, shopping area. We have product displays from the various manufacturing companies that are here, food and all kinds of cultural events. But it's really a way to reach out and to educate the Americans living here in Georgia about Japanese culture.
I think that's so important, right? It leads to mutual understanding. And like you said before, the student exchange from America to Japan and vice versa. We have some great comments. Susan says, thanks for hosting Jessica. She's a real powerhouse. Virginia says, oh, great. Now I'm craving Georgia coffee. Thanks for joining, guys.
Thank you. It's so nice to see Susan there. Susan's the one who helped me get in touch with, she's a friend from when I lived in Hiroshima, and she helped me get in touch with the people in Konu. So she was instrumental in kind of helping me kick off this project. So thanks for joining, Susan.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. We've got about 10 minutes left. Is there anything we haven't talked about in terms of the project that you wanted to talk about?
No, I think that pretty much covered it, but I definitely hope if you could, all of the listeners can kind of follow us on the Japan America Society of Georgia on social media. We'll be updating progress on this, and I'm sure once things really kick off, like once we start with the groundbreaking ceremony and the actual construction, we're going to be putting out a lot of videos that are showing, what's going on behind the scenes as the project goes up. We're hoping to do like a time-lapse video of the entire thing being constructed, which I think is going to be really cool to have. So if you'd like to kind of follow along and see what's happening, that's one way that you can do it. So, but I'm really grateful to everyone's interest in this, and really excited to see it completed.
Yeah, wonderful. Where's the best place for people to follow? The YouTube channel or Twitter, Instagram?
Kind of all of the above for the Japan America Society. If you go to the Japan America Society of Georgia's website, it has the links to all of the social media channels, and they're pretty good about updating all of them. So, and they actually do have a very active YouTube channel too, where we're putting all the various videos there. So that'll be one place if you want to watch the construction, for sure, that it'll be posted there.
Wow, how exciting. So this is such an exciting project. Thank you so much for joining and telling us all about it, Jessica.
Thank you. I appreciate the time so much. Thanks for letting me share the story.
Yeah, and I was so excited to hear about your work with YKK and the zipper company I'd never heard of. But it's so nice to have this chance to learn more about the Japanese investment and international collaboration between Japan and Georgia. So many great insights here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And thanks everyone for joining. Have a great weekend and see you next time. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.